Welcome back to another episode of Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation, right here on Verde Valley TV and KVNA 104.7 FM. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. We've got a great show in store for you this week. Later in the program, we'll be joined by AIA Executive Director David Hines to break down modifications for spring. We'll then be joined by Mingus Union girls basketball coach Paul Ventura. He'll discuss his approach to building a program, but on the other side of this break, we'll be joined by Coconino softball coach Kimberly to talk the role pitch framing and small ball plays in modern softball. All of that and a whole lot more on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere. Off the Bench, we'll be right back.
Two things we can count on every year.
A new set of tax rules and great weather here in Northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I am joined by Coconino High School softball coach Kimberly Dennis. Coach Dennis, welcome onto the show, and I love the flag behind you.
Yes, thanks for having me.
We talked a little bit about it. You can't see it if you're listening on radio, but Coach Dennis behind her has a Coconino Panthers softball flag. The beautiful stripes that you usually see on the United States flags are bats, and you see Coconino softball there, and the panther is the where the stars usually be, just to give you a horrible audio description as to what that looks like. If you do want to see what the actual flag looks like, please watch this on youtube.com. But Coach Dennis, thank you again for coming on the show this week. You know, 2020 obviously being a lost year for a lot of teams in the 4A Grand Canyon region and throughout the entire country. 2020 is gone, but in 2019, your program had a lot of very strong success, 14-4 finishing out overall. That included a trip to the playoffs as well. 6 returners were set to come back in 2020, but unfortunately, you didn't really get a chance to see that season pan out. So I just want to get in your opinion, where were you thinking about the team? Where were you? How were you feeling going into 2020 with your returners?
You know, we're excited. Like you said, we lost a lot of seniors from 2019 as well as 2020. So from those 2 years, we actually only have one girl, CJ Gonzalez, on the team as a varsity returner in those past couple of years. But she's done a great job of carrying over the traditions that we have here at Coconino. And the girls her age and the younger girls have just, jumped on her back, and she's carrying them along, and she's, being able to be that leader that we need to carry over the tradition that we have here at Coconino. So, yeah.
And I feel like for you as a coach to get that returner back, somebody who's already been in the varsity program since she was a freshman, now obviously she loses her sophomore year, but she comes back as a junior. That's somebody that can kind of help ease the transition for some of the younger players, or even the players coming up from JV to varsity, such as Sierra Durr and Marissa Rodriguez. They were on JV in 2019, and they're making the jump to varsity this season. Who knows if we'd seen them in 2020? That's obviously your decision, but COVID hits and who knows what's going on. So Coach, with bringing back, a lot of returners who are familiar with your program, obviously some a little bit more directly involved with varsity than others. Do you feel like this year for the Panthers here in 2021 is more of a refresh of the program, not a rebuild? I want to make that very clear, not a rebuild, but a refresh of the program. And do you think that this team can replicate their success from 2019?
I think we have a good chance for that. We've brought in, we've got 3 new freshmen that have come in. We also have a sophomore who was on the team last year, Izzy Pozar, as a sophomore this year. And they come in with a lot of softball knowledge and talent, and they've played a lot of club ball. And so but we've done our best to try to replace those seniors that we have lost. And, they have a love and a big desire for the game. So I think we can start where we left off, do a refresher, but we've got some good young kids coming in this year. And even the juniors that missed out on that year for varsity last year are doing a really nice job for us right now.
Any newcomers to the varsity level that you're excited about, Coach?
We're excited about everybody, of course. It's fun when some girls are coming, but there's always these girls that you don't know about, and then they just flip a switch, and it's neat to see that. So Sam Rodriguez is a freshman coming in. She's just very coachable athlete, and it was a nice surprise that she ended up on our roster. So, but Alyssa Faulkner and Hannah Thornsley are the other two incoming freshmen that we expect to do a lot of great things for us here at Coconino. So yeah, and then we just have, the juniors, like you said, that missed out on a lot of opportunities last year, but they've worked hard in the off season as much as we were allowed to, and they're raring to go.
Well, we are definitely raring to go as you get your first game this week against Greenway. We'll talk a little bit about that matchup a little later, Coach, but I do want to ask, with that gap year in 2020, is there any concern that some of the players might be a little behind in preparation for this 2021 season?
I think that's definitely a concern for everybody, more physical and, athletic ability, that type of a thing, decondition. So we had to work through that a little bit. But most of these girls, if they weren't playing another sport, they've been working with us in the off season. So yes, it's not that game knowledge and that game experience that they've been able to get this past year. So I think we will see some of that, but they have been working all fall and winter with us.
Coach, in terms of your roster, do you find a lot of players who are year-round softball players on your team, or is it kind of a hodgepodge of, I also play basketball, or I also play volleyball? In terms of what's more dominating on your roster, year-long softball players or sort of that mix?
Yeah. This answer is probably going to surprise you, but unfortunately it's year-round softball players. But I am a coach that really loves when they go out and play other sports. You're only young once. And I think it's great because you train other muscles and, you don't get burnt out as much. But obviously, if you're not doing something, you should come play softball all year round, right?
Exactly.
But yes, we've got a handful of girls that truly play all year round with a competitive travel team. But most of the girls, yes, are softball only athletes. We just have a couple that do other sports.
Well, that's got to be good for building your roster. At least you come in with players having that experience at a higher level, as opposed to, I played in middle school, but I stopped playing after my freshman year, or this is the first time I've ever picked up a softball in my life. So let's see what happens. So yeah, it's clear that experience is there for your program this year, Coach. Let's talk more about you building that roster. I know that you're at a bit of you're at a bit of an advantage with having year-round softball players, girls who have played everywhere, can play everywhere. But when you're sort of trying to fill in those gaps, are you looking more for skill, or are you looking more for need when you try to fill out your roster?
I think at the high school level, it's need. Like, for instance, a couple of those girls that play travel ball, they could be, the starting catcher for that travel ball team, but you're going to be our best shortstop, And I tell these girls over and over again, like it's a team sport. We're here for Coconino. We're not here for your stats or whatever. So we're going to play the best defense possible. And that could even mean, obviously usually you want to pitch your number one, but sometimes that just messes up your defense pretty crazy as well. So you got to figure out what's that strong defense.
Again, we are speaking with Coconino High School softball coach Kimberly Dennis. The Panthers get their season kicked off on March 12th against Greenway. Hopefully, weather pending. We do have a storm coming in as of this week, but hopefully the Panthers will be able to kick off their season on the 12th. Coach, I kind of want to go a little different route with our interview here. I was a catcher in high school as well as when I was in Little League. My sister was a catcher all through high school into college, including when she was a kid. Pitch framing has been something that I've been familiar with because my sister learned it at the travel ball level. And for those of you who are not familiar with pitch framing, it's essentially turning a ball into a strike. You can't necessarily reach out of the pitch zone and bring it back in, or the strike zone, and bring it back in. But if you can do it well, it really helps. So, Coach, I don't remember exactly where I heard this from, but I've heard some rumblings of some coaches are for pitch framing, some are not. I want to ask you, you've got a lot of experience in softball. Where do you stand on pitch framing, and is it something that should be taught at the younger levels?
Well, I think anything that will help the umpires see a strike instead of a ball is a good thing for you. So, but back to your comment, we've taught our catchers, like, if it's nowhere near the zone, then we're not catching the ball and trying to put it back into the strike zone, of course, So there's definitely some catching mechanics out there that you got to know how to frame a pitch correctly in order, or then you're just, making the umpire look a little silly. So,
or you're making yourself look a little silly, reaching one far out, bringing it back in. I love watching the Little League World Series every year and having these kids get a ball that's clearly outside of the strike zone and try to bring it in for a strike. It's a lot of fun. But pitch framing in general, Coach, I mean, how have you seen it kind of worked back into the game here in softball? As I mentioned, you got a lot of experience as a coach. You were also a player. Was it prominent when you were playing as well? Was it something that was at the main focus? Is it something more recently? For me, it's very recent. I'm not sure how you've seen it more incorporated into the game throughout your career.
Yeah, when I played, I just played, and I wasn't a catcher, so I didn't worry about pitch framing. So, but as a coach, I think it has probably increased in our game, but I think it's something that was always important for sure. Just, when you see a good catcher, and it's the ones that are doing that because they know how to do it properly, right? Right. And then the purpose of it is, helping your pitcher out on those strikes that could be strikes for any umpire. So.
How about small ball, Coach? A lot of slap hitters in softball. I know they're everywhere. You can find a slap hitter everywhere. We had them at Grand Canyon University. We had them in my high school. We had them everywhere. Where are your thoughts on small ball and how it's really kind of helped define the sport of softball when you look at the differences between softball and baseball?
I think that's what makes our sport super exciting, to be honest with you. Small ball is just really fun. You got to be good defensively to defend it, but it's really fun when you've got those small ball offensive players. So I think people who don't really know about softball and they come and watch fast pitch softball, they realize, well, what are those people over there on the left side of the box? What are they doing? But that seems like to bring up the excitement level. And I think we've gained a lot of fans in our sport because of small ball, for sure.
I agree. I hate to admit it because I really shouldn't be this biased, but in terms of the broadcast, I like calling softball more than I do baseball. The pace is a lot quicker. The games are a lot closer. Not that I don't love baseball, but it is that excitement of the slap hitters. And I remember my first call on broadcast, I forgot that the third baseman moves in during in that kind of situation. I was like, oh gosh, she's really close. And then it clicked in my head. I was like, oh, okay, it's the defensive shifts. But Coach, let me ask you this. When you're trying to pick a player to be that slap hitter for you, I know you're considering speed, but what else are you considering when you go, okay, this person could be my leadoff hitter or even somebody at the bottom end of my lineup who can help drive in runs or at least get on base?
Yeah, like you said, obviously they got to have speed in order to be a slapper. But obviously they got to be able to make contact, because if they have speed and they're striking out and can't get the job done, then that's not going to help you whatsoever. But another thing that we've looked at in the past too, if they're not a big power hitter on the right side and they do have speed, then hey, let's play around with turning her into a slapper. And we've done that a handful of times with some of our athletes.
Coach, throughout your coaching career, for those of you who do not know, Coach Dennis did get an opportunity to coach overseas with the USA softball team, which is absolutely awesome. And I'm incredibly jealous because I always wanted to travel, and B, I United States baseball and softball I'm all about. But I want to ask, did you notice any differences between baseball, or I keep saying baseball, did you notice any differences between softball overseas compared to here in the US? Is there anything that they do differently than we do, or is it pretty much the same across the board?
Oh no, there's some differences for sure. Obviously, I think the US definitely is a high level of fast pitch softball. I have gone to Australia, I've gone to Italy and Holland and Prague, and even within those countries, it's definitely different. Obviously, Australia was the most competitive, and you didn't see too much of a difference. But no, they're growing those sports over there as well, and it's really fun to go over there and see that culture and be able to interact with them for sure.
Well, I'm Italian, so I'm definitely jealous you got a chance to go to Italy. I've always wanted to go back to the mother country. But, Coach, any specific differences between those games? That, like I said, is there anything like directly that they do differently, or is it just sort of the pace of play that's different?
I think it's the pace and play. I mean, a couple of them were older athletes we were playing against, so you're not used to playing against, most of our team were the college age girls or older high school girls. And when we went over there, sometimes we were playing the 30-year-olds and, they're showing up doing adult things, and we're like, wait, aren't we coming here for a game? So, but you didn't get that in Australia.
They got their kids with them. It's the whole family and everything like that, of course.
Yeah.
Again, we were speaking with Coconino High School softball coach Kimberly Dennis. Coach, here in 2020, here in 2021, we talked about the lost year of 2020. Do you feel the region is up for grabs at this point with a lot of teams graduating some heavy senior classes? Do you feel like this year could be one of those years where it's could go to anybody?
I think it could, obviously I think every year is that there's always dominant teams in the region, but I think again, this year is unique in the fact of being able to fight through some of the guidelines that we have, as well as getting the girls back together and knowing kind of the priorities I think this season brings.
We will get a chance to talk about some of those guidelines coming up with our interview with AIA Executive Director David Hines on the other side of this break. But before we let you go, Coach Dennis, I got one more question for you. Your first game is this week against Greenway. How are you feeling about that matchup, and how nice is it to actually get a softball season this year?
We're super excited, but at the same time, we can't believe it's here because obviously season started later and we already have a game quicker than we normally have a scrimmage. So and then obviously we have cold weather and snow coming in. So we're crossing our fingers. We do get it in somehow, but super excited because it'll actually be the year anniversary of us getting shut down last year. So these girls are super excited to get back on the competitive playing field.
I was speaking with my news director about that too. It was so weird how this time last year, everything was starting to slowly shut down. Yeah. And now here we are in 2021 and everything's starting to slowly open back up. But Coach, we're excited about softball. We're excited about baseball. The spring season gets underway this week. Coach, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. Best of luck this season, and hopefully you'll get that game this week against Greenway.
Yes, thank you for having me so much.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by AIA Executive Director David Hines to talk about some of those modifications for the upcoming spring season and what we can expect. All of that and a whole lot more on the other side of this break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation, right here on Verde Valley TV and KVNA 104.7 FM. I am joined now by a familiar face of the program. We brought him on for the beginning of the fall season, brought him on for the beginning of the winter season, and we might as well keep the tradition going and bring back AIA Executive Director David Hines for the start of the spring season. Mr. Hines, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Philip. I really appreciate being on your show.
A little bit of a different location change for you this time. You're a bit more out center. Usually you're right over there near your cabinet of trophies and helmets, but we're happy to have you, David, as always.
Well, I appreciate it. I had a few too many meetings today, Philip, so I have to do it from my desk. I wasn't prepared enough.
Well, as we know, the winter season is starting to come to an end. The playoffs have already begun, or I believe they're beginning this week, began last week, I should say. And so I just want to kind of start with this, David. How did the winter season go in general?
Well, even though we had a delayed start, had some bumps in the road with high numbers and et cetera, I thought the season really did pretty well. The kids, the athletic directors did a great job of really adjusting to the fact of the modifications that we put into place. Obviously, playing in mass was something that was added to start the winter season. Again, I thought the kids really, for the most part, did a tremendous job. Understanding that it's much more cumbersome to wear a mask when you're playing, but they really wanted to play, and that was what we needed to do for that option. So very pleased with that. I think that as we finish up the last games today and tomorrow for most all of the winter sports, we're glad to kind of beginning to get to the end and get into the playoffs.
Yeah, very much so, considering the winter season at the beginning was sort of a big question mark as to if we'll even be able to get that winter season going. Obviously, you just mentioned it. It was canceled initially. Then it was a revote, brought the winter season back, everybody having to wear masks. Of course, there were some changes with that. We'll get into it. But also what happened in the middle of the winter season, fans were starting to show up a little bit more in the stands. It started out as if the districts or the school itself were uncomfortable with having fans there, if their county health officials were uncomfortable with having fans there. But now it was sort of allowing more and more fans. So as we go into the start of the spring season, where we see a lot more outdoor sports, will we see an increasement of fan allotment as the spring season goes along?
So, I think the numbers are better. They're not great, but they are better. As you said, most all of our sports, except for boys volleyball, are outside activities. So we are going to kind of take the same approach we did in the fall. Fan capacity, spectator capacity is at the discretion of the home school. And I think if the numbers continue to get better, then those numbers continue to trend up, and more people are allowed to come to a venue.
Of course, and of course, it comes down to those COVID numbers. That's sort of the big deciding factor as to if we'll see more or less fans as the spring season goes along. This month, as I mentioned, the AIA voted to remove the in-competition mask mandate. What led to that decision? That's going to go for the remainder of the winter playoffs and go into the spring season.
Very difficult decision, Philip, because again, in communication with sports medicine, their recommendation really was to continue and finish the winter season wearing masks. I think that the challenge for a athletic director is a little bit of COVID fatigue. They've been doing it. It has helped. I think that in a lot of our school systems within their communities, numbers have gotten much better. Not many cases at their school. And so the request was made by the board, at least, to reconsider the state tournament for the winter, to be able to relax that mask modification for the players on the court or on the mat or out on the field. So the mask mandate is still in place for coaches, for sideline personnel, for the kids on the bench, for all spectators. We're just lifting it for the players and the officials. And I think, over time, it was getting real challenging for the athletic director, for our officials, to continue to remind the kids, hey, get your mask up. And after a while, I think, it was a challenge. And so the thought was, let's at least for the playoffs, let's let the kids play without the mask, and we're going to cross our fingers that things don't go south.
Well, I'll tell you, I've mentioned it before. We'll keep knocking on that wood as much as we can so that we can make sure that we get the rest of the spring season done. Obviously, a lot of kudos to the AIA and participating school districts and schools for just pushing through the ever-changing modifications that we had for the fall, winter, and now the spring. It's great that a lot of these kids are getting an opportunity to play their senior years or their first years in high school, despite the ongoing pandemic. But you talk about the masks. I want to ask, is there any concern as we go along for the spring season that we will have to put masks back into play?
Great question. And one of the things is obviously that we have learned that there have been spikes. There have been situations come up. And we do know that there are some spring breaks coming up. And if people do not follow some of the protocols that are in place or don't pay attention to, kind of going crazy and not following those protocols, we could see an increase. And if we do see an increase, then there is absolutely a possibility that the mask could come back on. We're hoping that, with vaccinations, with people that, more people have either had it or being vaccinated or following the precautions, that we're doing better and we don't have that kind of big spike like we did late fall and early winter.
Very much so. Regarding masks again, I do kind of want to get a little bit of clarification. You had mentioned it a little bit earlier regarding sort of the, having to remind kids to wear the masks and sort of that enforcement of it. So where does that enforcement lie? Is that with the school? Is that with the AIA? Is that with the athletic directors on campus? Where does that mask enforcement sit with?
Well, I think this year, since we've had no playbook to follow, this is all new. We put some things into place, really kind of put the pressure and extended it onto the officials, probably a little more than we should have. Ultimately, it is the athletic director and the coach's responsibility to make sure that the coach's players, the coach themselves and their players are properly wearing the mask, and then the athletic director, that the spectators that are at the venue are following that protocol. The officials have a very difficult job to begin with. They're very focused on the rules of the game. We did ask that if you see, kids that had masks down, to remind them to put them up. If it became abusive, meaning a individual or kids were not, wearing them properly and not adjusting, that they had the opportunity to sit them out and be substituted for. So ultimately, as we get into the playoffs, that is the responsibility of the athletic director that is hosting that playoff game. And then when we get down towards the finals and it's at a neutral site that we're managing, then we will also be the enforcers of that rule.
Let's take it a step further. How about the quarantine time? What about the length of quarantine? Is that decided by the school? Is it decided by you guys? Is it decided by county officials? We had a school up here that decided to quarantine less than the other. Where does that sort of jurisdiction and that enforcement lie?
Yeah, our protocol was that if you were in a close contact or whatever, had to quarantine, that it had to be 14 days. Then the CDC came out with a new adjustment that you could do it after 7 to 10 days. And so it became, this is our recommendation, and the recommendation from sports medicine was to keep the 14 days to be cautious. However, since the CDC did put that out, if a school or school district determined that is what we will follow, then we would respect that decision and that district would allow that. So it's probably not that that pinpoint on this is what you have to do. These are recommendations. We hope people follow the recommendations, but if the recommendations change, then we will, we have not changed our specific rule. But if a school district has, they have the ability to do that.
We saw obviously in the fall and spring season, in-season tournaments as well as invitationals will not continue as much as they did in the fall and winter. We will not see those mid-season tournaments in the spring. So I kind of want to ask about that. Obviously we talked about the vaccine is becoming a little more readily available, as well as as well as sports going more outdoors. Will we see those come back at any point? Will we see the possibility of tournaments and invitationals in the middle of the season for this year?
No. And part of the thing is really, Philip, the reason I say that is we are already starting behind, a couple of weeks behind our competition date. And we have a limited number of weeks that we can participate. So really the intent, this really came at the request of the member schools, the athletic directors, the conference leadership. Their recommendation is we have got to get our regular season games in. And a lot of times when tournaments come out, people try to move their regular season games, but because we have less days to actually get those in, I don't see that for the team sports for the remainder of this year. Our intent is, as we move into next year, that we are able to bring all those tournament games back into play.
Well, what's good too is, despite the fact that we're behind a little bit, it was nice to see that the initial start date for the spring season was moved from the 15th to the 12th, which means, we can obviously get sports going now and kind of transitioning here from that. Referees, we're hitting into the spring season. Is there still a need for referees and umpires for the spring, or have we already passed that time?
No, we always are looking for referees, umpires, officials for all of our contests. It's a great advocation. It is a great kind of a side job, if you'll say, for college kids. You can make more money being an official than you can working at the local establishment or so. So we are always looking at officials. We have still, even though we don't have everybody playing this spring, we have a lot of contests on particular days. And we always can use officials. So anybody that is interested in officiating, we just communicate with our officials department or go online and look under the officials under AIAonline.org. And you can register to be official. We are always increasing. Brian Gessner, our commissioner of officials, every week updates us on the number of new officials. And every week for the last 6, 7, 8 weeks, we have increased officials. So it's never too late.
Well, that's great to hear. Again, Mr. Hines just said it. If you want to become an official, AIA Online, go visit that and go sign up. Again, we were speaking with I almost called you an athletic director. You were an athletic director. Arizona Interscholastic Association's executive director, David Hines. Mr. Hines, kind of going back to your past a little bit before we let you go. You were a track coach as part of many roles that you served before you took over your current position. This has got to be an exciting time of the year for you. You're a former track coach. So I want to ask you, are there any events that you particularly have a bit of a soft spot for in track and field?
Well, as an athlete, I was a hurdler. And so obviously I always pay attention when I'm at a meet at the hurdles. I enjoy watching great hurdlers. I was not one of them, but I do enjoy that event. But, really, I coached track for many years and have officially run the state meet, both as a coach and as an athletic director, and also here at the AIA. So anything track and field, there's a passion I have for that. I love watching track, but I'm a fan of sports all the way around. Anytime that there's competition, I enjoy the opportunity to go see it. And I really love watching our high school kids because over time, our kids have continued to get better and better and better. And it's nice to be able to see kids that perform and potentially break records from kids that either I coached or have seen when I was coaching. Very impressed every time I go out and watch those kids.
Hopefully we will get some record-setting performances this spring season, as the spring season officially began this month. AIA Executive Director David Hines. Mr. Hines, as usual, it is always great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on, and we look forward to talking about a successful spring season very soon.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk with Mingus Union High School girls basketball coach Paul Ventura about their season. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I am joined by a familiar face of the program, Mingus Union High School girls basketball coach Paul Ventura. Coach Ventura, welcome on to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I have to check the records, Paul, but I think you are now officially tied or one behind David Hines for the most reoccurring guest on our program. But as usual, Coach, we're always happy to have you.
Well, good. That means I need to be on again soon so that I can be first.
Yes, we will get a chance to speak with David Hines a little bit later. Or actually, we already did speak with David Hines. I'm trying to remember how the interview went. But yeah, you are in the same show with Mr. Hines. But regardless, a very improved season for the Mingus Marauder girls basketball program this year. Winless in 2019, obviously, and then here in 2020, a little bit of a weird year, but finishing out 4-10 on the season. A nice little stretch at the end of the schedule. You guys were putting together some really good home wins. So just kind of, Coach, in general, let's just start. How are your feelings on the season this year?
We had high expectations. We wanted to improve, obviously. I thought we did. We had, the beginning of the season was difficult, like it was for most teams. It wasn't unique for us in any way. But we got that slow start going where, we weren't as competitive as I wanted to be in some games. And then right near the end of January there, we started to flip it a little bit and started to play better. Even the games we lost, we were really competitive in those games, which is really all you want. If you're not going to win, you want to be competitive. You want to be in a game with the ability or the chance to win at some point.
Coach, just kind of looking out through the schedule, obviously in 2019, the team goes winless, but you were able to get some victories against some region opponents as well. Bradshaw Mountain was a huge victory, just to name a couple of them. So, in spite of the record, of course, this was a very improved season. And I know that you and I can both agree that if you guys had that sort of same success you did at the second half of the season into the first half, it's a much different season going forward.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, we changed our philosophy a little bit. And, I even admitted that was my idea going into the season. And then when we didn't have a real preseason and we didn't have a real off season, I started to get nervous about can we do this? Can we run the whole game? Can we play full court the whole game? So maybe those first couple of weeks of games was more my fault than it was their fault, because I didn't trust that I had enough time to give them what they needed. And I think if we did, we probably win a few of those games for sure. I'm not saying we would have, been in contention to win the region or anything, but I think we could have had a winning record if we played that way at the beginning of the season. Some teams like Saguaro, where we played first, it was like a big punch in the face right away, and we weren't ready. And if we played them again in February, I think we beat them. And so it's teams like that where it's like, man, I wish I could have that back. Or I wish I was doing what I was doing at the end of January and February at the beginning of the season, and the kids had a better chance to go out there and really use their skill set.
And that is kind of the unfortunate circumstance that comes with being in a pandemic right now, is the winter season at one point was canceled and then it was back. And there was so many question marks of, okay, well, how are we going to get kids to play inside a gymnasium when basketball, you're basically playing right up against somebody and you're constantly around people. And yes, we are all interested. I think everybody, fall coaches and winter coaches can agree, if there was a, quote unquote preseason or a summer workout, or you get your fall workouts, if you had gotten an opportunity to sort of get a chance to see your team a little bit sooner than you did, or get to be a little bit more involved with them than you actually were. Obviously, we could play the what if game. Yeah, of course, but coach, regardless, it was a great season, 4 wins on the season. As I mentioned, a significant improvement from 2019. Funny enough, you had the same number of wins as the number of seniors you're graduating, only 4, small senior class this year, which I know you're excited about. You'll be getting a lot of your players back for next year, including Taylor Brock, who we will talk about a little later. But coach, about those seniors, you've known a couple of them for a very long time. I just wanted to give you a chance just to kind of talk about the impact those 4 girls made on the program for however long they were with the program.
Yeah, I coached Kobe Mador from the time she was in the 6th grade, and 1 year off there when she was a freshman. And then Emma Hogard when she was in the 7th grade, and then that same year off when she was a freshman. And then I was, I've been fortunate enough to coach Chase Dirksen and Yasmin Mestis the last few years. And, it was that group of kids that the whole time we had been talking about, like, they needed to make the change, right? The first group it was unfortunate. I'm their 3rd coach in as many years, and that's very difficult to deal with. And then the next year after that, they're going to have that same hangover from that. So this 3rd year of these girls know exactly what to expect. They know what we have as a philosophy. They were the change. So they had to do some of that. And I think, they did their part. Kids could do the same what if game. Like, I needed to do this differently. I wish I had that back. But overall, they're good kids and they worked hard. And that's what we want. We want, kids that are going to be good citizens in their community, in their school, amongst their peers in the program. And then we want them to put in 100% effort when they are at the basketball gym. And if it translates into the game, that's great. And if it doesn't mean they're not an important part of the team. Emma Hogard didn't play a lot of minutes, but she's a super important part of our team. And that's part of the reason she's there, is because of what she provides behind the scenes that no one else sees. And, she really pushes someone like Taylor to get better in practice. So they've been pivotal for us. And I think they're going to be that springboard for this next group of girls too.
Yeah, that next group of girls you have seen for most of their high school careers, unlike, of course, this more recent senior class where, like you said, you were kind of transitioning into the head coach when some of those girls had become varsity players. Obviously, you were familiar with some of them, so they knew who you were going in. But this season, or I should say this upcoming season, you'll have an opportunity to sort of, okay, I've coached all of these girls. They've been a part of the JV program. They've been a part of the varsity program. And now they're ready to make that push into 2021, which again, we will get to here in just a second. But getting back to your team, coach, you mentioned Emma Hogard. Obviously, every team would love an entire team of Chase Dirksens and Taylor Brooks. But you have what I really loved about watching this team this year is you did have a lot of girls who played their roles very well. One of which, obviously, you mentioned Emma. Emma may not have been a leading scorer or led the team in minutes, but she came off the bench and was effective. Rachel Odell is another one. And Rachel, same thing, didn't play a whole lot, but when she came in, she was effective. Heaven Claw, Maddie Mathis, some other players you'll be getting back next season. season. So you've got to be feeling pretty good having a lot of your returners come back from last season going into 2021. And so that's a horrible way to transition to my next question, Coach, which is improvement. Just kind of more talking, I guess, to sort of to put the two together. Maddie Mathis, we had talked about throughout the season as somebody who was almost on the cusp of being a part of that first unit. Obviously, Mariana Lopez being the majority point guard for the Marauders this season, but Maddie found herself some time with the starting five. So, Coach, if you were to hand out a most improved award, who would it be?
It's Maddie Mathis for sure.
Figured.
I coached Maddie in middle school as well. And so we've been around each other for a really long time. She knows my expectations for sure. And she's always had some natural ability, where I told you, it's like, she's always on the verge of like being out of control, but it's her control, where everybody else I'd be saying, don't do that. But with Maddie, we say, go ahead, Maddie, like that's your game. So, I think what she did for our team this year shows her improvement. She's an ultra competitor. She just wants to go out there and compete against people. And it doesn't really matter what the sport is or what the activity is. That's just her mentality. If Maddie gets a really good off season under her this year, if we have a real off season, which I think we might, and she has a really good off season under her, I could see her making a huge jump next year where her senior season is lights out. And, she plays way bigger than she is. She plays way quicker than she actually is. She needs to work on her shooting a little bit. Her jump shot needs some work. And everything else obviously still needs work, but that's the most glaring issue for her right now. But if she can really fix that, she's going to be great going into next year. And then that helps with Mariana too, where if we can move Mariana off the ball a little bit, that will help her out. And she is someone who can play that two position, that, shooting guard type position, and having two kids that can handle the ball on the floor at the same time will be good. I hope, if Heaven can play more minutes next year, that would be helpful. Playing with masks on for someone like Heaven who has asthma issues and stuff like that, it becomes really difficult. And so we had to monitor her, and she was really good about coming, asking to come out when she felt it. So she was giving me like a minute and a half at a time. Yeah. And that's not a lot. And so Maddie played some of that point guard position for a while, which is natural for her too. But having three girls that can do it next year will help Mariana to not feel like she has to do it all the time. Right. Maddie's also a really good passer. We talked about, she probably missed out on like 30 assists because the girls aren't paying attention when the ball's coming to them. They don't catch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Maddie magic pass, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, we got to have a little less Maddie Madness and a little more Maddie Magic next season. But
exactly.
Well, along with Maddie, as I mentioned, you'll be getting some big returners back: Mariana Lopez, Heaven Qua, Taylor Brock, who kind of was your second leading scorer behind Chase Dirksen this year, the senior and sophomore connection. But I want to ask, Coach, throughout the season in terms of JV, what is your collaboration with Coach Hoke, and what are you specifically looking out for? We saw a couple of JV players make the jump to varsity a little later in the season, but throughout the year, what are you kind of looking for in a player at the lower levels, and how much collaboration do you have with Coach Troy Hoke, who is the JV head coach?
Normal years, I like to be involved with them more than I was this year. But even with that, Troy and I have really good communication. So we pretty much talk every day. And so whether it's at the gym, after the gym, whatever it happens to be, we do some kind of a debrief of the day together constantly. So even though I wasn't seeing them in practice all the time, I knew what practice was. And then I would watch the games and be able to kind of decipher from that. His emphasis with the kids is to get them ready to play for me. And that's right. What he tells them all the time is, it's my job to make sure you're going to Coach Paul and you're learning the things now. He doesn't have to teach you then. He doesn't want to be teaching you things you should have known when you were on JV.
Right.
And so some fundamental things, especially, we hammer that as much as we possibly can. You have to be able to control the basketball, not turn it over, make layups, make open shots. Can you run an offense? Do you understand what running an offense means? and then how to play good team defense. So I think, Troy does a great job with it, and we're similar in ways and we're different in ways, which is perfect. That's what they need. There's sometimes with the varsity players that I'm the bad cop and he's the good cop, and that works. And then with the JV players, he's the bad cop and I'm the good guy until they practice for me, and then they're like, "Whoa, I don't know."
Where's the yelling coming from?
I know. And but I think they realize, all right, these, they're passionate. They want us to be good, so they get what's happening. But yeah, there's a couple of kids that for JV that I think are going to make the jump next year to varsity. And I pulled a couple girls up for some games, and that was kind of to cover my back, where if someone got in foul trouble or someone wasn't performing, truthfully, and we needed someone else who's going to push them to perform. Right. Those sophomores were there to kind of do that and say, hey, I want the minutes, I'll do it, so you better do it. And it worked. And they didn't see the floor really, but I think just being able to dress for varsity was an accomplishment. And then Taya Hoke, Troy's daughter, basketball IQ wise, she's probably one of the highest already. She's there, which is normal for a coach's kid. Right. And she has some skill things that we're going to work on over the summer. She can actually shoot pretty well. Mm-hmm. So that's something we're going to probably utilize next year. Kiki Saravo is one of those kids that's like a, grinded out, gritty player, and she can shoot a little bit too. So having someone like her is helpful. And then we have Kiara Vaez, who's the point guard for the JV team. She's got some good skill, and she needs to learn how to play a little quicker for us and be able to play that full court type game. Speed has to increase for her a little bit. And then a freshman for sure that I was impressed with was Michela Martinez.
Okay.
And truthfully, if Michela was, if the season went another month, Michela probably ends up dressing for me at some point. But she has a couple of things I need to improve with her, but overall her game is really solid. And for a freshman, to always be in the mix of like, if she's going to be the high scorer for JV or not is a good thing.
Again, we are speaking with Mingus Union High School girls basketball coach Paul Ventura. The Marauders finished 4-10 on the season. Unfortunately, their season was cut short due to a COVID issue outside of the team's control. But regardless, a significant improvement from 2019, going winless in 2019 and snagging 4 wins here in 2020. We look forward to 2021, Coach. I want to ask you one more question. In terms of your preparation, what are you doing now to get ready for next season? Are there any dates that any potential players need to know about, or anybody who might want to try out for the team next year? Before we let you go, Paul, how are we looking for 2021?
Yeah, I'm already planning things for sure. We're going to go and play in a tournament at the end of April, the varsity. And, there's always kids that play some spring sports, so that kind of, you might not have your full team, but we have a good amount of kids that are going to keep practicing here, probably starting next week. And we'll get back in the gym and get ready for this tournament at the end of April. Then I communicate with the coach from Mayer quite a bit, and I helped him with some game film and stuff this year, and we've communicated the last couple of years. We're going to scrimmage them a few times over the summer. Nice. As well as we usually try to get into a tournament in June, and so we'll probably do that as well. But as soon as the school year ends, basically anybody coming up to the high school can start to come to open gyms. And I got to say, my staff is pretty fantastic. We run a lot of open gyms. Now, it's not just 2 days a week for them over the summer, except for last year, which was weird. Even then, everything we could do, we did. But in normal years, which hopefully this will be, we practice 3 or 4 times a week throughout the summer. And those young kids, when they have that fear, but once they get over that fear and they get there, they improve drastically by playing with seniors right away and starting to improve we work on individual skill work more than anything throughout that summer months. So, but yeah, we put it up on the website, the Mingus website. So any kid that is going to go to school there, look at the website, and especially right after May, and they graduate and they can actually start to come and participate in our off-season workouts. And I have a dedicated group of kids that I think are going to stick with it. You know, Taylor isn't playing any other sports, so she's made her focus basketball. Mariana has played other sports in the past, but I don't believe she is this year. So I think her focus is basketball. So we have some kids that are really focusing in, and that's going to help going forward. Mariana is a leader too. And so being a person as a junior who is a leader going into her senior year with that leadership skill, I think she can really kind of galvanize the kids together, and they'll be a cohesive unit for sure.
As we close the door on a very frustrating 2020, we look for a lot of optimism in 2021, especially with your program, Coach. And I want to thank you for coming on the show this week. I'd like to thank all my guests for coming on the program this week. Coach Dennis of Coconino Softball, AIA Executive Director David Hines, and of course, the man right there, Paul Ventura, girls basketball coach of Mingus Union High School. Coach, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Phil.
That's going to do it for this episode of Off the Bench. We will have more sports for you next time right here on Off the Bench.